5 days you work, 1 whole day to play. Come on everybody, wear your roller skates today. It's Saturday, 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 it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday, Saturday, it's Saturday,
Saturday
with Renee. Episode 117 in a row, undefeated, undisputed. Saturdays with Renee, featuring Renee Johnston. I'm Jared Ball. Welcome back to Black Liberation Media. Black Liberation Media Unchained. So go ahead and like, share, subscribe, drop those super chats. The Patreon is still an option. Channel membership, all of those things. Do all of those things. And Renee, how you feeling? We heard the cough before the live. What's going on?
It is getting better. I promise it's getting better. But it's definitely, you get sick and then it transfers to like the 3 weeks long cough. So we work on it.
And as you demonstrate, we could recommend for the people a solid week of at least some remix morning show is good for your health.
I agree.
So,
I agree.
whether in the audience or on screen, make sure you are joining each weekday morning, most weekday mornings. And wait, so as you were reminding me, what's happening Monday?
So
that we can remind folks about,
yes,
including myself.
So last quarter, we did that day-long stream because we just decided to try it to see how it was going to work. And the people enjoyed it. And so we're going to do it again on Monday. So we're going to try, and we don't normally do a remix on Monday, but we'll do remix on Monday and go through the day. Keep the stream going. Josh Lorick, aka Lorick, is in the background somewhere working on it now.
Right on. So folks, make sure you are back with a Monday morning and for the day long celebration. And yeah, I'll work with you.
Schedule.
The morning is probably the most likely, but I don't know if the morning has been populated yet, but
it has not. And I gotta track Kamal down. So maybe we can go back in time and you and Kamal and Air Doctor
can have an original I started. Oh my God! So when one of my homeboys, when he's talking about the reverse hashtags as a community together, he'll type it out as FBA DOS. I just had this. He just sent me something this morning, so I was thinking it could be like the foundational Black liberation mediaists. Oh my goodness. But yeah. I will double check literally while we're on here and send out a couple texts and confirm, because everybody's home. So there's like a lot going on and everybody's trying to, be all up on everybody's time for these brief moments where it's like a reunion of sorts.
So I know you're about to be an empty nester.
Yeah, we're not ready. I'm not ready. I don't want the empty nest. Everybody needs to stay home. That whole empty nest thing is American mythology, gringo mythology. Stay in the house. What is all this kicking everybody out at 18? Stay home. What is out there? Ain't nothing out there.
There really isn't though. There ain't nothing out there.
Oh man. So yeah. So everybody, another one of my younger homeboys is a new father, and I'm saying it to everybody, as I know enjoy every minute because it goes quickly. And and the empty nester thing is overrated.
Yeah.
It's overrated.
Yeah.
So But yeah, so folks, again, like, share, subscribe, support the platform, put this in your socials. Make sure you are got the bell rung so you're not missing all the great programming that's coming out. And as is the case, as will be the case for this show, where one of our favorite new guests is making a return. Dun, 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 dun. Dun, 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 dun. Pun intended, right?
Right? Exactly.
Right? Did I get the music right?
You
Yeah,
did
something
get the
like
music right.
that. Yeah. All right. So with that, let me just bring her to the stage. Welcome back, Samantha Youssef. Everything's plugged in, so I can now.
Thank you. It's so nice to be back. Happy holidays. Congratulations on episode 117, all those things. I'm so happy to be here. I've missed you both.
Likewise, and unlike these fake consecutive games records that go to so-called goats of today's leagues, we have actually not missed a game. We have been here every week, live or not. So salute to Renee, the award-winning journalist and spreadsheetologist. you know. So yeah, just keep it going. But anyway, it's good to see you again. Welcome back.
Thank you. I'm a bit nervous because it's been a while since I've been like on a screen. It feels like I got used to it a little bit, and then now that sort of first time nervous.
It's like riding a bike.
I know you'll give it like 30 seconds and you'll be all good. So okay. Before we do what I normally do, which is jumping in, how about we actually do what we're normally supposed to do, which is for the folks who are unaware of who you are. Can you introduce yourself, give the background, who you are, where you're at, what you do, and then we can get into it.
Oh man, I still haven't worked on a proper bio since I've been through a transition in my life. So, I'm Palestinian and Ukrainian. I worked in Hollywood for a couple decades, and then I went back to do my graduate studies in sort of a interdisciplinary, anti-colonial kind of program. And then now I'm trying to. I feel like that's taken me in a path now where I want to. I don't know what the best way to say it is, like break down what we're doing, what we as Hollywood artists have been doing to contribute to imperialism and colonialism and all of these problematic things. I don't know if that's a good intro. That's who I am. Oh, and I grew up in Canada. I guess that's significant too.
There we go. So just so people are clear, after the first time Sam showed up on Jared's show, I became quasi obsessed because I appreciated the way she was breaking things down. And so, as everyone also knows, I call my mother for everything. So after I watched it, the next thing I did was text my mother and say, you have to watch this thing that Jared just did. And then we got Sam on. And then Sam is now like one of my besties. Like we chit chat all the time and, all the things. And as we were getting to the end of the year, I was like, this would be a good time to bring Sam back on because it's been a minute. And it's always, are you working now, Jared?
I don't know. We'll see in a second. But
you're good.
You sound good to me.
Okay.
All
okay.
Right.
Good.
And so between Jared and Jackie and Ntume and Sam, I can't enjoy anything on screen anymore. It's all shot to shit. It's so bad. I think I said this before the show. My son, like 3 weeks ago, was like, I'm actually like a little worried about the fact that you can't enjoy anything anymore, mommy. And I was like, I mean, I enjoy, looking for the problems. I'm good. Like, I'm okay. I'm good with things the way they are.
Yeah, it's not like the fun is gone. I actually have to
Yeah.
say something similar all the time. I still have a lot of fun. I can still enjoy a good acting performance. I can enjoy a good set design. I can enjoy whatever, or hate on it equally for other silly reasons. But I think it is still important that we not lose sight of what's going on. So yeah.
I agree. And, there's just been a lot of stuff happening, just a lot. And so I wanted Sam to come back for multiple reasons. One, because in the back of my mind, Canada has always been a problem. And I've always recognized that Canada has been able to like hide in the shadow of the US and pretend like it's not a problem, but it's a problem. And because Sam lives in the belly of that beast, I have learned a lot about how problematic Canada actually is. Then Sam never actually got to break down some of the things between Superman and the Fantastic Four. And I tortured myself and watched both. And oof.
So we have to redeem that too, because you put in those hours.
Oof, I'm never getting those hours back. And it's just problematic. And lastly, Sam has what I consider to be one of the most unique, like, life experiences ever. Because depending on which home Sam is in, Sam's life is completely different. And I don't know how many people have actually like lived in a world where if you're in Canada and as long as you're, hiding your jewelry and wearing the appropriate clothing, people don't consider your ancestry or your ethnicity or your national origin. But if you go home to where you originate from, people see you as an oppressed person that they can shit on. And I'm sorry to put it that way, Sam, but I feel like that's probably the best way to explain it. And in all of our conversations, these multiple things that Sam has experienced in her lifetime, I just feel like we should talk about some of this stuff because I think people miss a lot. I don't like, people look at Samantha and I don't know how many people see that you're Palestinian just by looking at you. And I don't know if it's because I talk to you so much, but the more I talk to you, the more Palestinian you seem to me, which is, I don't know if that's like my own thing or what. So those were the three things that had me thinking this is like the perfect way to end the 2025 year on Saturdays. And Leah's asking a great question. If the discussions are hard for Sam, which you can start by answering that one, and then we can kind of go wherever you want to go, Sam. I want to give you room because you've earned that, and I want you to have it.
Thank you for all of that, and for having me here for that. And Leah, thank you for the question. Yeah, I think sometimes, it is like I never know sometimes, just to put it out there, like sometimes I feel very confident to talk about this stuff, and then other times it's sort of emotionally I realize that I'm like it's a little harder to talk about, but I feel comfortable in this space, and I definitely feel like because I feel like there's at least and I guess I'll elaborate on this as we go along, but my experience even navigating the sort of leftist anti-imperial spaces has been an interesting experience too, because I've encountered pushback because I'm not or that there's an idea of how people think a Palestinian is supposed to be, even in our allies. And so I think it's something that has to be talked about. Like, I feel like, I think that in Palestinian communities, many people stay in the Palestinian community, so they might talk about these things, but it doesn't really always overlap into other communities and stuff. And I think that, I think part of what's like, yeah, it's just something, I think that there's an idea of what Palestinian identity is supposed to be, and that's, yeah, and so you get pushed out if you don't match a sort of I guess idea that people have. And so I think yeah, I don't know, sorry, I'm rambling a little bit, but I definitely do feel that those things are, it's all of it, I think, is important for people to understand that there's a I think that there's been a flattening of what Palestinian is also, even in how people want to support us. So yeah, I don't know, I'll stop there, I guess, for now. But
no, that makes, and part of this too is it's really like, it sounds like three separate things, but it's all connected,
mm-hmm.
right? Like really and truly, like when you think about living in a settler colony, which we all do, and the role that plays in how media pushes things, and you know what they allow you to do and don't allow, and who gets the space and who doesn't get the space, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
so a part of this also is like weaving that thread, because for me, that, you know, as we've talked about, right, like it's so important that we give like this clarification that all of this is connected. And the reason that we are so propagandized is because the settler colony needs us to continue to live and breathe in the settler colony in order for it to continue to exist. So all of these things like feed into that.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very interesting. The whole, like, I don't even know if interesting is really a good word for it. And
or scary. Yeah.
Right. That could be the other word for it. But so, only because I know you also have experience in this and people might not realize it.
Mm-hmm.
So Untelevised says, honestly, I see a lot of Samantha's analysis about movies and TV intersects a lot with how video games do similar things with propaganda and such.
They do.
And yeah. And Sam, you know, do you want to talk a little bit about your work in the video game, since I didn't mention that, but also something you really.
And I even see this because a lot of, you know, like for me, it's been, I know I've said this before, but in the spaces that I was in, like when you work in this industry, and especially on, like for me, working on the animation side, there's a lot of overlap on certain projects, like feature animation, or the work that I would do. Like I would work on VFX animation, video, like I would consult on video games, because VFX and video games kind of work artistically in some, there's some overlap with that. And while I was, you know, sort of embarking on my research and stuff, once I got access to more like academic, like behind that wall of, you know, from like as a public person, before I got into doing my graduate studies work, I couldn't access a lot of this literature. And so once I was able to access a lot of the literature and or sort of help me find that pathway of people that were doing this kind of research, I also feel that it's not like it's a bad thing, but a lot of the research focuses on the obvious stuff, like the military entertainment complex will focus on Pentagon related projects, or video games like Call of Duty that are very obviously like training programs, or they feature the military, you know, they normalize like warfare, and they'll address films like you know, Black Hawk Down, or all of these films that are very like military oriented. But there is the whole ideological side that's what's happening with these superhero movies, or with like, it's very like, I am profoundly disturbed with like how it's, I would say it's like equal, if not worse, even in children's animated films like Pixar, Disney, Sony, DreamWorks, excuse me. And so a lot of the video games too, there's video games that are just like, oh, it's a fantastical world, it's a fantasy world with magic and all this stuff, and it's they do propagate, you know, these kind of ideologies. Like they propagate, they've got all these, you know, fun, whimsical Disney looking like MMO, like, you know, massively multiplayer online, you know, worlds, like sandbox worlds. And in these worlds, like the villains always have Arab and like North African style, you know, designs to their looks, and they're all demons or shadowy people. And then there's the people of the light, you know, and these crusader type characters. And they integrate things into even these fantasy games that are like, you know, drone interfaces. Like somehow in this magical fantasy land, somehow you get these options to go into these vehicles, and they use drone targeting interfaces and mechanisms. They get you to, like, they build these kind of sandcastle areas where you can build your own houses and build your own settler colonies and decorate your house and do all these things. And the narratives are constantly, you know, I mean, like this is the whole, I think this is the whole thing that is the lens that I'm constantly looking through as well, is like the narratives are always around, you know, the foreign policy ideas, which basically translates into colonialism, like extractive or settler. But they're all of these stories always have like the outside evil that was originally there on the earth, that these heroes have to go and push it back, push it out of the civilized, you know, core. And you see that in K-pop Demon Hunters, where they have all these demons that are basically the indigenous people, and they have to build like this magical light barrier to keep these evil indigenous people out. Otherwise they'll destroy, you know, this wonderful utopia civilization that we have. And so even just those ideas are just constant narratives in a lot of these games that don't look like they're, you know, that are, and they're not as criticized as the games that actually are, like, you know, Call of Duty, where you actually see that these are like, you know, warfare kind of games. But the ideal, and I, you know, I don't even, you know, there's like so many things that I'm probably just not even thinking like of talking, like mentioning, but there's so many problems, you know, in these games, and so many appropriation problems. And it's always coming from the lens of like the people that, and it's the same thing in the films that I work on. It's the people that are in the highest positions of power. So even when you see, like, I mean, and I feel like I used to love, like, you know, like I've had my gaming experience. Like I used to love, like, for people that know, like there's this series called Legend of Zelda, and I used to like love this game franchise. And it's, you know, it's made by Nintendo. It's a Japanese game, but the whole thing appropriates South American indigeneity, and they kind of, you know, steal and incorporate these ideas to create this sort of magical realm by like, and so even when you think of like, that's not necessarily a game coming from the North American perspective, but it is coming from the perspective of people that have always been colonizers, you know, or something like, or like that kind of idea. And so I feel like a lot of these stories, like I always look at like this whole world that's being crafted, and, you know, going to the films that we're going to talk about, like Fantastic Four is a great example of like the world that these people would love to see. But it's like, I always think of things like when we look at the West, or especially the settler colonies, like especially the US, Canada, Israel, Australia, New Zealand. And I've lived, aside from New Zealand, I've been in all these settler colony spaces. And it's like, this idea, like, you know, there's everybody that lives in the Disneyland, like a Disneyland came and was built, and this Disneyland isn't like equal, and everyone that's in the Disneyland, then there's the different things, like you have, you know, like in America, you have like all the people that were enslaved and brought over for labor and everything, but all of it is constructing this Disneyland. And this Disneyland basically has nuclear weapons, bombs, torpedoes, everything that it's constantly spewing out of it. So the people that lived outside of Disneyland are starving and constantly trying to navigate this, but they don't even exist in the conversation because so many of these conversations are about the discriminations happening within the Disneyland. And that's the lens that I'm constantly like looking at. And it's not an oppression Olympics or to disqualify what's happening inside the Disneyland. But I think that, you know, when we're watching these films, I think a lot of people are still looking at it from the discrimination that happens from the Disneyland and not actually stepping, I don't know if I'm making sense, but like not stepping outside of that whole thing and seeing like what's happening. And I know that we talk about imperialism and we talk about these things in an abstract, but then people keep getting fooled by the media that's constantly being thrown at everyone. And I think part of it is just, if you shift your lens to that perspective, then all of these narratives become a little more visible. I don't know if I'm making sense, but that's the way I'm always looking at them, if I could explain it in the best way.
No, it makes perfect sense to me. I mean, we talk about this stuff a lot. You know, it's very clear. But you said, and this is something that you know we've kind of gone back and forth about, and you mentioned it, and somebody caught it in the chat. Can you talk a little more about, because you do such a great analogy between Disneyland / Disney World and like colonizers and imperialism, and could you explain that just a little?
Yeah, I keep pushing me to, because like I'm still finding, I feel like even from my first thing with you, Jared, it's like I'm still trying to find my words to explain how it works in my brain. But yeah, I feel like settler colonies, like literally, like Disney World is like a perfect example or microcosm of a settler colony. And there's all the people that are living in it, and that's, I think, you know, even like with businesses or with the, like things that, like, you know, when we, like, there's nothing, I think like I think that's my perspective. I think we have to look at the apparatus that we're in like a Disneyland, and we have to also imagine that like if you were in Disneyland, you can't think that like, oh, this show, this like it. Sorry, I'm jumping around. I'm sorry. It's the first time I'm saying this really out loud properly, but like it's like when I hear people criticizing things that are happening because of imperialism and settler colonialism, and we look at them as separate instances, like you're like I see a lot of people that are critical of everything, but with movies it just kind of falls apart. Like for some reason they seem to think that these movies are reflections of culture and society. But if you imagine that you're in Disney World, you're not going to go on a ride or one of their theater experiences, and it's not going to be like, oh, this theater experience was a culturally independent production that is like much more diverse and is really like showing that, you know, we've gained some agency in this Disneyland. All of these things are made by Disneyland to support Disneyland and to, you know, like Disneyland is not going to let independent shows happen in Disneyland. So you could be a bunch of employees and you could be talking about things at Disneyland that you don't like or that you wish that this was better or whatever. But ultimately, everything inside Disneyland, including what is brought in, what food is brought in, like you could say, I don't like that Disney food is not very healthy. But even if you want to cook your own food in Disneyland, you still have to buy things from the Disneyland shops or the Disneyland things. And so I feel like there's to me, the settler, like, it feels a bit more complicated, and because of all our identity politics and how we identify with things, and there's a sort of a person, I mean, I feel like there's also that personal backlash, that there's like a part of us that resist information that contradicts our identities and stuff. And but I think like that's, I don't know, like I just see, like to me, I just see Disneyland like Canada, or like these are Disneylands. Like Israel was a Disneyland, and I feel like since Israel is the settler colony that we can observe the most easily right now, in the way that its formation was, in the way that it exists, and it's so concentrated and accelerated. So I feel like things are more, can be more visible maybe to some people. You can, like, like the whole fabrication of a settler colony, like just even how modern Hebrew had to literally be invented because there weren't enough words in what was left of like recorded, biblical Hebrew. So like everything was crafted in the same way that we would create the Klingon language, for a Star Trek, or for the way that we create these languages in Game of Thrones. Like they got linguists, they got people to help like expand and elaborate, this language. And so there's like a whole fabrication of what this settler colony needs to be, and what these ideas need to be, what the branding needs to be, how to just constantly reinforce it. And I just feel like that's kind of like what, I don't know, to me, I just see them as the same. It's really hard for me to even separate, looking at these institutions. And I think that's where, coming back to the film thing, or video games or media, like I don't think that, like, we can't see these as separate institutions collaborating with each other. It's like they might be managed, just like at Disney World, like maybe this restaurant is managed by different people than that ride is managed or whatever, but it's still all part of creating Disney World, and they're all ultimately tied at, like, it's a trickle down thing, but they're all tied to reinforcing that. Like you're not going to have something that doesn't, it's not, the Disney World apparatus is not going to support or reinforce something that is not, protecting it or supporting it, that in some way. Does that sort of, did I help? Like, do people see why I see it like Disneyland a little more clearly?
It definitely works for me. In fact, I agree with those in the chat who say it's or making the point that it's a very strong analogy. And as I was listening to you, I'm thinking of, that it works, and especially here in the US, where obviously I'm more familiar. The reason Disneyland or Disney World function or work with the reason the illusion works there, that this is somehow some different autonomous space, where here people could see the manicured nature of it and not be confused or suspicious, or, to your point, like no one would go to these places and expect to see some radical version of Mickey Mouse being performed by the underground, in the corner of Disney World, right? Nobody, they would be like, no, of course you're not going to have that, because this is private property and this is a private thing. And of course, blah, 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 blah. But when you step outside, the reason that is able to function like that is because the mythology and the propaganda of the free, that we exist in a free democracy outside of those particular spaces, allows for and others, including a lot of some of my favorite media scholars have pointed this out, that calling this a democracy, and this is in fact what Bernays' point was when he was creating the illusion between democracy and capitalism, that that because you promote this. And I know he's fallen out of favor here lately with good reason, but I do credit him with at least popularizing. I think William Bloom is the one who actually said this, but the point being that Chomsky popularized the point that violence is to totalitarianism propaganda is to democracy what violence is to totalitarianism. That the more you tell people you're in a free democracy, the more you must propagandize them. And the harder it is for them to see, why I think people here in the United States have a very difficult time recognizing that the very form of propaganda that would limit the performances in a Disneyland are exactly at play outside of Disneyland. And to your other point, more importantly, they are all in fact connected. And this is why you get private equity. This is why you have interlocking boards of directors and all of this. And I just wanted to show real quick that because I think they're rebuilding the platform. I used to be one of my favorites back in the day, theyrule.net, where you can play with these boards of directors in a kind of sleek way, and you can start to see where all these overlaps are. Just taking the one example of Walmart, it's, there's United Health, you have the people sitting on these on each other's boards creating and this helps, I think, destroy the illusion that they help to create, that these are independent operating, disparate, not really feeding into anything. And then I used to for hours just sit with this, because you could just go forever. And you can get into like, talk about, maybe not, Renee has set new levels with deep dives, but you can really just start to see where, we're not living in some separate, disparate, equally competing world. You just create these maps where there's all this overlap. So to just get back to your point, that these are all happening in some interrelated way, with intelligence, with military, with every other form of institution, and being cobbled together, much like, as you said, of ancient Hebrew and so on and so on. So I love it. Yeah.
And I think like when, again, like I haven't seen like historic documents of this, but I just get the feeling that, when these, like when settler colonialism really started happening too, I think that these were spaces that they imagined as this is why I think there's so much like offense of not white people being in these spaces, because they built them like resorts for the people that, in this case whiteness, for the power structure, that the people that were in that space. And I think that Disneyland is also a great way to look at it, because there's obviously that privilege of being able to enter Disneyland. Like, can you afford it? Can you, there's all kinds of like things in that bubble. And I kind of feel like all these spaces now that these, like, what do they call it at the UN, the WEOG groups, the Western Europe and other groups, right? Like they went out and they enslaved people to help build their fantasy resort and get the economy going, or get like a population in there. And then once they feel that resort is built, they're like, now we want everyone out. Now this is our, this is our space. And so I think, looking at these things like resorts or Disney World, like I think those are like really good little mini examples of how the vision, I think, for these settler states are. And that's how I don't have the American experience in the way that you all do, but like when I look at it from the outside, when I look at what Trump is doing with ICE and all of these, and he didn't even start ICE, right? But like all of these things, I think he's, with like this thing with Elon Musk, or like having like, it's like South Africans can come in, but not, like everybody else, like even indigenous people are now foreigners to our space. And they're just, I think that they see it as like, we built like the resort is now ready for us to live on. And now we don't need these people anymore. So it's time to, push them out or something. And I think, going back to the Canada thing, and this is why, like, I think all these things are tied together, like from Superman to Canada to everything. Because I believe in the States, like, again, I don't want to be quoted, but I was just quickly looking up these things before. And I think in the States, it's like technically 60% of Americans are white, or 61%. And then it's like other identified
That
groups.
sounds about right. That sounds about right.
But in Canada, we don't actually do our polls in the same way. So you kind of have to, because Canada's mythology I think that's what's interesting about Canada. Canada has absolutely no identity except a comparison to the US. So the way that we are sort of, I think that Canada is a lot of the mythology and the propaganda and the sort of the disassociation from the rest of the world, because most Canadians are not, like, again, I'm talking systemically, not, there are some really excellent individuals that have been doing amazing work, but there's like just this complete bubble that people live in because we have just enough comfort. And we also have this mythology that we very much acknowledge the culture, the multiculturalism, but at the same time, erasure, just like all these things. And I think that's why Disney, sorry, I'm jumping around, but even Disneyland culture, this artifice, this kind of plasticized artifice that comes out of being disconnected from your roots, from your culture, from your history, like all of this kind of thing of history starts when we want it to, you know, that nothing really existed before, and training people to be severed, to sort of appreciate modernization and to like sort of, and Canada has this weird mythology where we recognize our multiculturalism, like it's little stamps that we can wear, being like, oh, this is I have this background or something. But you're still Canadian, and most people don't know anything about the place that, like, if they're from the diaspora, like of their place of origin, even in Europe or whatever, they're sort of disconnected from that. So there's just aesthetics, like food that's still made or something, but there's no knowledge of even history. And so because of that because of this mythology, like we see ourselves as better than the US because we see ourselves as diverse and multicultural. But going back to the statistics, if you add up, because they don't say white, we don't have like a white population statistic, like very like easily readable, but basically everybody that comes from a European descent, if you add up all of the European descended Canadians, you basically have like, I think it's 81% of the population. So we also don't get as much, like ironically, so we don't get as much diversity because all of these people identify as Canadians and they're not looking at things from an Indigenous perspective, from a Black perspective. Canada's always, we just think like we're better than the US, which makes us great. Like if the US is the greatest place in the world, well, we're better. And so that's sort of the way that the cultural mythology seems to work here. And I find that really fascinating because that's basically like Canadians love talking. Like you hear that a lot, like how people compare themselves. And I think, and nothing is ever, like, you know, even for the average Canadian living in like, and when I say Canadian too, I just want to say like I'm not talking about the land of Turtle Island. I'm literally talking about the settler Disney like complex factory that's built on top. But most people that are within that space have never met an Indigenous person, like ever. We've got this great mythology going on here that anti-Black racism is more of an American thing because we say, well, we didn't have the slave trade happening in Canada, but nobody talks, like, we're still a monarch. Like King Charles is our head of state. We're not a republic. Like we're a monarchy. And like, how do you think the royal family had the money to build this settler colony state? You know, like no one talks about that. So there's so much denialism in Canada. And I think that's the hard thing. And we do have a majority population that doesn't feel that that's something that's a part of their lives. So it's just the whole, but like that erasure thing is really big here. Like that idea of just like,
well, we know what Canada thinks about Black people and race, just from the reaction to your upcoming FIFA World Cup qualifying team. And so folks were definitely wanting to remind that Canada is supposed to be white when they saw these Black faces popping up on their national team. And I saw some stuff on Twitter. There was a little backlash and people were like, and all of a sudden Canada, you know, they were like, I don't know what you put down on paper, but the whites know. The whites were the whites were counting numbers. They're counting, so they got their private record, whatever it is. And they were like, hold up. We don't mind winning. We don't mind the winning, but that's not what our team's supposed to look like. Anyway, I'm sorry.
It's no, and that is like, that's the thing. Like I think because we have like that's what I find disturbing about Canada. I feel like Canada is like the aspirations of what a successful settler colony should be, you know, like that this is the way that like that all these other places probably aspire.
They're like the model minority, the model settler colony.
Yes. Yeah, and it's like, it's because it's like they won in a way. I mean, I don't want to believe that they won. I think that this is a global thing that we have to push back on, but in this space, that narrative like really dominates. Like it's really hard to, you know, and that's the thing, like that 19% of non-white people is very separated communities too, because, you know, you've got like your Asian, like different like countries from East Asia, South Asia, you know, there is a small like Arab population. There's different, there's a very small Black population. I mean, but there are Black communities, but like a lot of even Black communities that established their own towns, like ended up having those towns like destroyed. And, you know, so it's like there's so much denialism here, but because there is this overwhelming Eurocentric descended majority, it doesn't get, it's hard to get enough people to challenge it, I think, which is also, and then our media is just, I don't know if anyone's seen it, but even through the whole, like I would screen grab things, I just gave up now, but even the whole time that the genocide has been happening, like even when there were really big things that even American news was covering it, like some massacre that happened or something that was really huge, the front page of our main news channel was like, I still remember this, it was like these parents with their adult son holding some cats, and they were like, our son moved back home with his cats, here's how we're coping. And this was the front page of like the news, like this is Canada. Like this is what I'm like trying to tell people, like it's really they've been very successful at keeping things in a bubble, and I still run into people that don't understand that there's something that there's like they don't even know that there's something going on half the time. Like unless they're in a city and have seen a protest, most people are not even aware of what's been happening in the last 2 years, let alone, you know, all the things that have been happening over the last century for so many different groups of people. So I mean, Canada is like a Disneyland. Canada feels like walking around a Disneyland like half the time. It's really, it's really disturbing. And most Canadians don't even know about like, you know, what we do in Canada. Like Canada controls, I think, over 50% of the world's mining, and they go, like, we haven't done, there's a woman, Tamara Lawrence, who does really good, like war, like anti-NATO kind of work. And you know, she's also reported, and we do have some independent media, like there is the Breach and the Maple that are able to cover some of this, but again, like it's just such a small group of people that are, you know, trying to do this kind of work. And like I think what she reported was that Canada hasn't even done a peacekeeping mission in 30 years, and yet we're constantly sending peacekeepers like all over the world, particularly to areas where we're doing extractive mining. There's you know, there was this Somalia affair that I think probably people know about and stuff, and most Canadians still don't even know about, like, talk about the Somalia affair. And I was watching some things about this situation that happened where Canadian soldiers had beaten and killed these Somalian boys, and they had pictures of them like posing with these boys that were cut up, that they had, you know, just really horrible things. And these were Anglo-Saxon Canadians and French Canadians. And they even had video, like I found a video that was on our Canadian news, like in the 90s, I think. And it reminded me of, like, I don't know if you remember that, was it the New York Times? They did an interview with an Israeli soldier that was like humanizing him because he couldn't eat meat anymore because of all the bodies that he drove over with his bulldozer. And it was a whole article that it was like humanizing him, that like this poor person now is like suffering trauma from doing that. And Canada did the same with these soldiers. Like, you watch this video, like it's online, like if people, I think it was on CBC or something, but you can hear these soldiers are sort of talking about the conditions of how difficult their life is being like occupying forces in Somalia, and the heat, and people don't understand what they're going through, and like how difficult it is, and how and so I just feel like you see these patterns of this kind of behavior repeating in all these like Disneyland projects, I guess. And there's just it's not unique to, I mean, I think it probably just keeps getting worse, maybe, and more depraved, and they have more capacity to do worse things, like what we're seeing, like with this culmination of Zionism and stuff. But like these, you know, even like what you see Israeli soldiers are doing, Canada has a history of doing similar things when they've gone on their, you know, peacekeeping like or whatever missions and stuff. So yeah, sorry, I'll just stop because I've been talking for a lot. I don't know. Like,
no, but this, you know, and we're gonna end up weaving through all of these things, like, because I don't think it's possible to unbraid it, right? Like, when you think of the imperialism and the colonialism and the oppression and all, like it's like a braid, right? Like it's all like woven in together and it can't be undone.
Yeah.
And it's, you know, but so very quickly, and this is going to be totally off, but I want to make sure that we catch it before it goes away. One, happy birthday, Art. So
happy birthday.
Nice.
Yeah, happy birthday, and thanks for the super chat.
Thank
wow.
You for the super chat. It's my birthday, but all of you on BLM are getting a present. For the people on screen, to the undefeated chat, y'all are the gift I never asked for. You just keep on giving, including you, Samantha. I don't want to interrupt, just wanted to thank you for being you. So we were going to interrupt with that.
Interrupt.
Thank you. And
the message as much as the money. Sorry, Sim, go ahead. Yeah.
No, that's all. Like I feel similarly about this space. It's been really great to be in this space with all of you and the undefeated chat. I can't see the undefeated chat at the moment, but I do really love the undefeated chat.
Yeah, undefeated because we get things like this and I just crack up. So I manifest Samantha looks like a human version of a Disney lead character.
You're not the first person. I don't know why. I've spent my whole life, like, this is a side thing. I don't want to like center myself too much. Like, but like I literally have gotten that my whole life. I feel like people always told me I looked like an anime character or a Disney character or something, and I don't understand why, but I feel like this has been a consistent, like, I feel like it's not the first time I've heard that. So
so I think you should take it as a compliment.
Thank you.
You know, like like I can't think of a Disney princess that's not like cute and like with the eyes and the, you know, like the perkiness, like the whole right.
Thank you. I think Disney would be traumatized to know that like a Palestinian has a Disney princess look.
So I'm all for the description, and for people who don't know, like Sam's own sketch of herself, you look like a Disney princess in your own sketch of yourself, like not even being funny.
But that is my base. Like I started, like I went through a lot of Disney training, so like that was like the first decade of my career was Disney artist.
So I think it's priceless. So that I just we had to do it, but so I'm trying. So you know, let's talk about the movies a little bit.
Okay.
All right. So, Lord, and now they're doing Supergirl, which I can't even like.
Oh gosh, I know.
I'm like, oh, I can't even.
But they will. They'll milk. They're gonna milk.
They're gonna milk it. And the minute Superman ended with her coming to pick up the dog, I knew like that was gonna be the next thing, was going to be a movie about her. So I'm not like shocked at all. But so can I just say for the record that I didn't even think Superman was like a good movie. Like I
It
didn't
wasn't
think
a good movie.
I
Thank
didn't think the
you.
acting was good. I thought it was very like it was a little too like AI for me. Like it was too much, like the dog looked very fake. Like none of it looked, it wasn't even like real. It all seemed it was very weird for me to watch the whole thing. And then, so I watched that first, and then I watched Fantastic Four, which was equally gross. But then it was like this whole like weird, like this world of people. And I thought about what you always say with like people, and I was like, this is it. Like this is like they live in Disneyland. Like they live in their like bubble, and they've got these four people who are able to like save them from everything. It was just so weird. Like the whole thing was so weird. And so I don't even know where we can go from there. But I just wanted to open it up because I know you've got a lot.
I confess I didn't put myself through rewatching them, but I have my notes from before here. So there's also like, if you remember moments that I don't bring up or something, I don't even know where to start though, because there is a lot. But I think also to your point, just as like from a film, like even before we go into the ideologies, like as a film, like from a filmmaking perspective, like these films are getting more spectacular, but they're not better films. They're actually just worse. Like they're really, really bad. Like there's a lot of messaging. There's a lot of subliminal messaging that is, kind of like what I was going through in the Andor critiques that Jared, that we went through on your channel, Jared. Like there's so much subliminal messaging that drives things, but the stories themselves, like the actual, like just as a film or narrative, or like just in terms of nuance or like quality cinematography or quality, even the cinematography is just getting a lot worse. Like they just have more moving cameras and everything is so spectacular now, but you actually don't have like great camera shots or like anything that's actually like a quality of the craft. I feel like that's been diminishing, and I guess maybe to sort of, I won't spend too much time on that because I feel like there's more of the ideological stuff to talk about, but just if people ever are curious, like one thing that stood out to me, which is a great way to maybe visualize even how that's gone downhill, is like Disney's been doing all these live action remakes, of The Lion King or of Mulan or things like this. And I just remember like someone did a shot by shot comparison of The Lion King. It was on YouTube, like Lion King from the original and from now. And there's so many problems with the original Lion King, so I'm not like endorsing any of it, but just in terms of cinematography, the compositions of the shots in the original Lion King were really well done. Whereas in the new one, there was like, they tried to copy it, but you could tell that these people don't have a good sense of composition, and they move the camera a bit because that's always going to psychologically engage people a bit more. And there's obviously the fur on Simba looks so much more real, and the water can glisten off of it and all that stuff. But
I think I saw the same thing in one of the critiques or something similar. And one of the critiques that they had was also the facial expressions on the live. It's like they can't recreate. So all what would have drawn particularly a child into the cartoon is gone, and it's just like this animal saying Simba with no expression, and it's like, what the hell? Yeah. So yeah, sorry.
Yeah. No, it's all those things. Like it's like even because I'll probably just go into my geek like animator like or my job now or my old job, but like it is like assessing what style you're going to tell a story in will affect the believability, because it's not believable to have something that looks super photorealistic doing human expressions like a lion. That you can't achieve that, but you can achieve it in a more stylized drawing in the drawing style or more stylized kind of version. And so it's like even those decisions, like they're just made to do like high end rendering, to sell tickets, to make it have this like adult look and contribute
and
to
real
the
lions
military technology.
and real lions aren't standing on cliff edges giving cinematic speeches and monologues. So that's, so like you can't, you have to, that's supposed to be the point.
Yeah.
But I'm sorry, again, I'm sorry.
No,
Yeah,
it's all that. And it's sorry, like this is like where my brain kind of jumps around, but I feel like these are also the things that like, I haven't formulated this very well, but like there's this obfuscation of how we're supposed to perceive things like everywhere. And I feel like that, like even just stuff like that, like we don't question those things anymore. And then what's like the idea that having it be like flashy 3D technology that also contributes to, robotic warfare and stuff, that like that suddenly replaces any of that questioning or something like that, that's more believable or more accepted. Like there's, sorry, I don't know if I'm making sense, but it's like this weird, like, that, and this is repeated in so many ways. And this is the issue that I even have with like, things that become very liberal, the dangers that they have, the way that they shape that we perceive, that it sort of creates this illusion of this is the entirety of an understanding of something, and that we accept all the rules in it, and don't think about like those things, and that realism is problematic to me for that reason. I don't know if I hope I'm making sense. I don't know if I'm
no, total sense. Yeah.
But sorry, to come back to Fantastic Four and Superman, like all of the, like at least even, and like I know we talked about the Disney thing on the show, so the kind of people that were making the original Lion King, like situating it, in Africa with all white American cast except for James Earl Jones or something, and like just all of this, like the whole thing is, but at least in terms of artistic craft, there was a bit more like artistic decision making in it. And the way that the industry has changed, like this is how I paid a lot of my bills a lot of the time, was going and consulting on these projects, because now the way the industry has changed, and you like a lot of these films, unless it's ILM, like ILM is like one of the only in-house VFX places. Otherwise you have places like MPC or Frame Store. These are other animation houses that get Marvel contracts or Disney contracts for all these live action VFX projects. And a lot of the people that work there just learned the software. Like they just learned software and motion capture cleanup. They didn't learn cinematography. They didn't learn art. They didn't learn like any of these things. So that's also why, you're seeing, and that's a cheaper model for these companies, because they don't pay people in animation as well as they used to pay people in animation. So they're hiring all these people for very cheap labor, often like even below minimum wage. But it's sort of, that's just kind of how this machine is working now. But a lot of the people that are working, not everyone, but unless they make a lot of effort on their own to try to learn, a lot of them don't even have the ability to visualize those things. So they're thinking in terms of the software. They're just thinking of moving the camera a bit, and they might try to copy some of the shots from the original Lion King, but then they just want to add all their software tricks to it, and they don't work artistically. They work more in that way. And that's why we see that a lot in these VFX projects and stuff.
And so Mani asked the question, and I feel like you're hinting at some of this, and there it is. Sorry. So Mani said, can Sam talk about why the US refuses to lean into animation and why everything has to be live action? And I think money is probably, it sounded like, right? No. Is there more to it than that?
No, because I mean, when you look at like, I think, when we were doing hand-drawn films, certainly salaries were higher because the artists also had to undergo, like, you would go through a lot of training before you could become an animator. So there was sort of an equivalence in the ways that salaries were offered. But I think like a lot of it, I mean, for me, like this is, I think that this is more because the 3D software is a dual use software. It helps with drone warfare. It's used for drone warfare. It's like, this is what Pixar and ILM were built together. So ILM, like, I just always interrupt me if if I go to industry talk or something and jump ahead. But like, ILM is Industrial Light and Magic, and it was founded by, it's part of Lucasfilm, and it's sort of like the studio that originally, like, for Lucasfilm projects, you know, things like Jurassic Park was done at ILM, the original, like, or the Star Wars series. And this was sort of considered like this, if you were in the industry and you wanted to work on these live action projects, like, ILM is like the place. And then in feature animation that's more stylized, you know, it would be like Disney, Pixar, you know, DreamWorks and stuff. But Pixar and Lucasfilm and ILM were not originally, they were created to help accelerate the research for remote drone or like remote warfare technology, because they had found that they couldn't field test fast enough to develop this software, and they found that artists actually challenged the software. So they ended up developing these studios and working on, and so there was a dual use that they can do soft power things like create films that shape ideologies, and then also you know, this software is what drones use to render and understand spaces that they're in, or robots, or all of that kind of stuff. So I think for me, like, I just think that, you know, hand-drawn Disney or hand-drawn films were a great tool before, like, the idea behind all of these studios always had this imperial, they were always part of this system. They weren't just like, oh, there was some guy named Walt Disney that just was this creative artist and magically made this studio, and all these artists just flocked to him and they work in a little vacuum of like making beautiful films. It obviously, like, being a part of Hollywood, it was always going to be aligned with, I think, this sort of cultural. I saw on Red Nation, you know, Gabriel Rockhill has recently published his book, and he's talking about, you know, this whole like cultural apparatus, and that's sort of how I kind, the way he was describing things is very similar to how I kind of envision these things, and or how it's made sense to me in my experience. But so I think, you know, at the time, like, for children's programming, for all these things, like, animation served that purpose. But once 3D kind of came in, then now they have a means for this to be duo purpose. And so a lot of, like, but they don't have enough stories. Like, these people are not actually, like I was saying, like, the artistic levels and the ideas and the imaginations have really depleted. And often they're just telling these kind of settler, colonial, imperial stories in different forms. And so they're just constantly looking for more to produce. It's just constantly expanding with streaming services, and everyone wants to produce more. So they're not going to reanimate The Lion King unless they're like, we could do it to look super realistic. So I think it's just important to sort of think of 2D animation or hand-drawn animation in that way. I hope I'm sort of explaining, I hope I'm making sense, but like, so I think that there was never, if something that served more purposes than just the drawings could come along, then that would replace it. And that's what 3D has done. And there's still a lot of, you know, for like DreamWorks and Disney and Pixar and Sony are still producing sort of fully animated features. But I think the live action, I think it's more, I think there's also that, I think what's disturbing, like, about the superhero movies and everything is that they just have a bigger audience, you know, like children's fully animated features, they're targeting people within a span of, you know, maybe 10 years of their life that they're really going to be watching these shows. Whereas all these superhero movies and live action, like fantastical live action ones, they overlap, like, because you've got like Harry Potter or like, you know, more violent ones or whatever, but some, like, you can get a broader audience. So I would, that would be my speculation on it, it's more, it's that kind of thing. Sorry, did I derail from the question?
I don't think so. Jared, you had pulled something up. Do you want to?
I mean, I think I saw this. I'm now I get confused where all these discussions have taken place, but I believe it was one of Samantha's, maybe with millennials are killing capitalism, or maybe this is also reminiscent of what I know Dwayne Monroe has shown. So I don't remember where I remember getting this from, so forgive me, but it speaks to what Samantha is talking about in terms of the military, as they say here, the military industrial light and magic complex. And it's just showing the overlap of these relationships. We have the Department of Defense, Air Force, ILM, Lucasfilms, Netscape, Xerox. I mean, it's universities, flight simulators, Atari, Northrop Grumman. So it's just it's meaning to, I think, describe the political, military, and economic interests involved in all of this production. Where the people come from who work in these spaces, where their work goes when it's completed out of these spaces. And similar to the point I was trying to show with the theyrule.net maps, that there are these interlocking, overlapping relationships that, to Samantha's earlier point about this interconnectedness of the colonial apparatus, it's important to consider. And this is why when we're critical of these popular representations of media, news, etc., we have to understand that it's out of these similar matrices and complexes that we get these popular forms and these narratives. So yeah, that's it. And then Samantha, I don't know if there's something more you would want to say about this. But yeah.
No, maybe just to address the like cost thing a little bit too, just to sort of dispel any of that, because like in the hand-drawn days at Disney, a really high budget film would probably still be within $100 million budget. And often those ones came because they started introduce, like I remember, because like I worked on the Tarzan sequel, but we used the same technology. They called it deep canvas then. It was just 3D backgrounds for all the vines and jungle that he would like navigate through. So those started getting more expensive, but it usually would fall around 100 million or less. And a lot of these projects now with 3D, like, like Superman or whatever, they're going up to 200 plus million dollars. So they're willing, that's the thing. Like, I mean, for me, these are more, I think this is, yes, they reach a broader audience, and for that reason too, they'll pull in more money, they'll make more money. But I think these are more ideological things. Like they're willing to pay more on these projects. And I think that there's also, I mean, this is not, psychology is not really my area, but I do think there's a psychological aspect that these spaces create. Like, I think the colonization of our, I don't know, I think about that a lot, how as an artist working in the industry, I always felt like my imagination was being colonized, like just, it was something, even before I really understood what fully understood what imperialism was, I felt like there was a hijacking of my imagination. I remember just thinking that consciously throughout, like progressively over my experience in the industry. And I think that the thing that they also like about the live action element is that it creates, like, I think for everyone, like we see how, like I don't know, and I could be wrong. I don't want to presume for everyone on the planet, but I'm really seeing how when people can't imagine something, like sometimes I'm talking to people and they can't imagine what I'm talking about because they've never witnessed it. So they just don't believe anything that I'm saying, and they don't have the capacity to even just imagine that or something. And so I think that's the scary thing about these live action films, is that it puts a reality in a world where you see real people, and it's more dangerous than a reality that, say, a hand-drawn Disney film could present, even if there are still ideological problems in the hand-drawn Disney stories. But this makes people feel like, I saw this in the world and this is the best way for us, or like, I don't know, like it creates a false reality that looks very real. So I think that's also part. Those would be my speculations on it.
It makes perfect sense. I mean, when we were talking earlier with Mtume about how to read Donald Duck, one of my favorite points about that book is that it makes the argument that Disney's ideological reach is enhanced because the cartoon weakens the defenses of children and allows for the ideological messages to be more easily delivered and palpable for children. But to your point here, to get those same messages repurposed for adults and young teenagers and whoever, or older teenagers and young adults, it is more effective to bring it into the live, so-called live space, to take it out of the animation, which for the rest of us is more easily, connected to our youth, and we're like, oh, that's just kid stuff. But when we see, and then I mean, all the other things that are added, especially when we're attracted to the people, when we're attracted to the actions and the behaviors, it's easier. And the other thing I just was thinking of just quickly is that damn it, I think I just lost it. One thing. Oh yeah. I got it. Sorry. One thing that I like to always bring up is that, especially with my students, to just sort of alleviate this concern around assessing impact and effectiveness, is that we don't have to speculate. When you hesitated a moment ago around not being how much psychology should you attempt to bring into the conversation, we at least don't have to speculate that, the founders of the U.S. mass communications research and digital technological apparatus were very clear from the beginning. Psychology is going to play a big role in this. Whatever we think about their approach to psychology and Freud and whatever, or and mass psychology, I'm certainly not qualified to assess the accuracy of all that. But what I am qualified to say is that the founders of this media environment, they wanted to build from that, from what they were taking from those studies and that research, how to manipulate people's public opinion. And it often involves manipulating imagination, what we, our hopes and our dreams and our aspirations. And then, of course, as Fanon pointed out in many years before all of this, in terms of the colonial context, he said something, the quote that I always want to quote that I can never remember properly, that the goal of the colonizers to destroy the dreams of the colonized, and the goal of the colonized is to dream of the demise of the colonizer by any means necessary, which is not really how he said it, but that was the point that he was getting at. So yeah. And then very lastly, even those fools on South Park some years ago, I think for a wrong political context, made a very important point in their double special. I think they even got awards for this, on Imagination Land, where they were talking about that the right-wing response to 9/11 was creating within the imagination of white America a collapse. Like they were saying, we can't even, our imagination has been totally taken over by this war against Osama bin Laden. So I'm not agreeing with their politics, but I thought that they actually made a very good point for their world, using their cartoon to say, we can't even imagine stuff anymore. You don't even let us dream right anymore. So, but I think that is the goal. So I just wanted to support your point that
yeah, thank you.
Absolutely. That was all that to support your point. Yeah.
No, and I think also, like, I think that's I think when, like, I do feel like they've outsmarted us so far, like in general, like, because, I feel like, when I talk to, let's say, an average person, I count it as a terrible example because people are really not informed here, but when I talk to like an average Canadian person, like sometimes I think that there's also, you know, part of this whole like the political stage, the political theater that they do, and they present people like, let's say someone like Trump, and you're just like, oh, he's so stupid that, you know, like that it makes you think that this system is stupid or that it wasn't, but they've been playing us like this whole time. Like it's like those CIA documents that that was just spoken about like on Red Nation, you know, saying that they were going to try to co-opt Marxist thoughts by using their language. And that made me think about the conversations we were having about Andor, because I was like, that's what they're doing with genocide. They're normalizing genocide. They, like, you know, they stole an Indigenous child. They're doing all these things. They're naturalizing genocidal things. They're normalizing it in this story. And they're constantly messaging images that are not part, like you think they're using language like anti-genocide or resistance or rebellion, but everything that they're messaging underneath is like against collectivism, that collective people are stupid, collective people are hordes, that they're not thinking they're lesser people. So they're actually like training you underneath to see like these groups as others, and the hyper individualized heroes with American values as like, you know, as the only thing that matters, like in its, like, to survive or to whatever. So even the empathy towards genocided people in that series was you were already primed to dehumanize genocided people, and I feel like this is where they've built like a very, and it's and I do think that they've been more successful than we have. Like, I mean, obviously, because these are the people ruling the world, like they're in control right now, but a lot of people, they've, you know, I just feel like, you know, this if they hadn't hijacked our imaginations and our ways of thinking, there would be more people on the streets. There would be more people, you know, fully understanding what needs to be done, and also fully seeing the people that are currently ruling us for what they are, like that it's not, you know, so I do think like, you know, I do think like all of these things, they've been very successful at playing it, like using psychology to even override reason and intellect and everything. Sorry, I'm rambling, but I
No,
feel
you're fine. But I just, so it's always so funny. You say this when we talk a lot too, like how uninformed Canadians are.
I'm so
And
sorry, Canadians.
no, but you know, I don't see people in the US as particularly informed either, right? Like I find that even the people who think like, oh, like I pay attention to these things, like they're watching the mainstream version of what's happening, right? Which is not real information, right? It's not giving you anything that's like legitimate. So I think even, and I don't know if it's worse or better, but for someone to think they're informed because they watch mainstream news, but they're really not informed, right? It's like that's those squares, like what you know what you know, you don't know what you don't know, like they're, you know, those four squares. And I always think of that when I think about like being in a place where even the people who are tasked to giving you information are giving you either bad information or opaque information or partial information or just simply false information, right? And so you think like, oh, well, I watch news, like I spend all day watching the news, I'm so informed, and you don't know shit. Because the goal of the news here is not actually to inform you, right? The goal of the news here is to keep you propagandized by the things that the government wants you to be informed about. And it's such a tricky, you know, like I honestly don't know what's worse. I don't know if not knowing anything is worse than thinking that you know something, but what you know is actually nothing, right? Like it's
The Vernon philosophy of news. That's the question you're raising. And in some ways I agree. Like I would rather that we were never told anything about Palestine than be told what we're told by the mainstream press and have to unlearn that before we learn the correct. Because there's always, and that's for me the what I always struggle with all of this, that we have to first go through the deconstruction of the nonsense before we construct a better analysis and framework. But as C. Wright Mills said, common sense is more common than sense. And that's by design, I think. So
Yeah.
I would be shocked if Canadians were less informed than U.S. citizens.
It might.
I
mean, honestly, we're like. I feel like we're just a 51st state. Like, I feel like it's the same, you know. Like, but
so you agree with Trump? That's the headline of the clip.
I mean, I think
Samantha agrees with Trump.
No.
Canada is the 51st state.
I think. Let me back that a little bit because I don't agree with
Too
Trump.
late. It's clipped. It's out there. It's too late.
No.
Jared always trying to get people in trouble.
But to that point, though, I do think that another way, like these are like my meandering thoughts, you know, like it's always been a divide and conquer, right? It's always been them drawing borders on napkins and dividing us, but they divide us regionally. They divide us like, I don't want to use the word biologically because I don't like use it. I don't think there's a biological evidence for race, but they create a social construct in our mind where they've created borders between us. Like they're just constantly creating borders like everywhere. And I think that that's also part of the problem because so many people were slow to catch on with things that are happening with what colonization is, because they're like, oh, that's a separate kind. Even for myself, like, you know, growing up as a Palestinian, I always knew what was happening, but it took me longer to start recognizing that. I mean, not like much longer, but, you know, a lot of like you kind of think, oh, that's happening in Israel, but Canada's a separate country, or but these are not separate entities. Like these were all part of the same. You know, and when I lived in Australia too, it's like you're just in parallel universes. It's like the settler colonies start and then they all kind of just grow in their own way, but they're all like from the same place. They're not separate, and there is no loyalty of like whoever is governing these state borders. There's no loyalty to the people that are living in the borders. So even the ideas that we have of what is a country and what, like, I just find like, that's why I'm like, you know, how is Canada sovereign from any of this? Or we're just seeing the West, like we're seeing Europe throw Europe under the bus to follow NATO, you know, to sort of support the NATO apparatus, support like. So I just think like all of the West is just a big country, and it's like a royal family of people, and sometimes it's this brother that's in charge or this sister that's in charge, and they're like siblings that get a little bit, I don't know. But Canada's always been like, and I think that's the thing about Canadian propaganda is that we're just so even unaware of what Canada is. Most Canadians don't even know much about NATO. Like they don't really even know what that is, even though we are, you know, one of the, like a very significant participant in NATO. Most Canadians don't know what's happening across Canada. Like we're 35 million people like scattered across like a very large landmass, but the places that are not inhabited as like colonized areas, or by like the colony people, most people don't know what's going on there. There's bases and weapons testing and everything happening. Nobody like knows that that's going on. Most Canadians don't even really understand that we're a monarchy, and we don't even have like, I think we're the only, like what I read at least very briefly, you know, just even our constitution has something in it called Section 33 with like that basically means that we don't have civil rights. Like we have civil rights, but all of our civil rights, like their permissions, like freedom, like, you know, just even freedom to practice your own religion, freedom to protest, freedom of speech, all of these things can be annulled by like Section 33 in the Constitution, and at the government's discretion. Like they don't have to give evidence for why they're taking away your civil rights. Your civil rights can just, like, Section 33 is there to say that you don't have civil rights, and that can apply for 5 years and be renewed indefinitely. So we also don't even have like and I think we're the only country in the world that has this, except for the West Bank in Palestine. So like just even stuff like that, Canadians don't even know that we don't actually have protected civil rights. We can't do anything to amend our charter, our constitution. It has to be King Charles that does it. And so like there's just like all this stuff that Canadians, it's not part of the discourse. Most Canadians don't even like know that. And so that whole thing, like even where Canada was like officially announced as Canada in the late 1800s, is the same time that, you know, the British were also starting to enact the Zionist project in Palestine, starting to move, you know, starting to have these conferences and move people over. Like all these things are, they're not independent from each other in any way. And Canada's always served the British Empire. And now we basically, you know, we're a huge, I mean, we're a factory for weapons manufacturing, and we ship a lot of parts through the US. You know, like that came out in the Breach. If anybody looks into the Breach media, they did coverage on this, but we've constantly been bypassing international law by funneling weapons through the US, and then those get distributed in other places, and we claim that we didn't have anything to do with it. So I don't know, like I don't really see Canada as even being, I just see it as a factory on stolen land to serve whoever's in charge of the Western Empire.
And this is a conversation we had, I think, last week. Mm-hmm. And it flows back into this idea of like being informed versus not being informed, because people here will tell you, like, this is why the US is so great. Like, we have our civil rights and it's written in the Constitution and da-da-da-da-da-da. And I think everyone's starting to understand, well, not everyone. I think a lot of people are starting to understand now what I said last week, which is if someone gives you a right, that also means that they can take that right away, right? And so there's also this, like this really absurd idea that like in the US, well, we have those civil rights, but we don't actually, right? Because as we're learning, like the government can decide to do whatever they want to do. And unless the people rise up to kind of fight for their own human rights, you know, like human-centered rights, like I'm human and therefore I'm just going to say this is my right to have this thing, the government and all of its forces can just run all over that, right? Like they don't have to comply with anything that they've told you had. And so, you know, there's that, is such an interesting idea, like this idea of like, we don't have rights in Canada based on the fact that they've told us like you don't have anything, versus people telling you have rights but you don't actually have them, right? And so like it's right back to like the
same thing,
right?
though,
like which one's better? Like
yeah.
would you prefer to know that your rights are actually not your rights and they are telling you have these things but you don't actually have them, and they can be taken away at any time, even though that's somewhere written down that says you're supposed to have them? Or would you prefer to live in a place where you don't realize you don't really have rights and you don't actually have rights anyway? And it, you know what, like I don't know which one is worse.
But remember, your version comes with health care,
which is dissipating now. They've started privatizing our healthcare, you know, like they're putting more money. Yes, but and I think that's so, it's interesting that you bring, because I was just thinking this as you were speaking, Renee, and I think that's part of the thing though, is they've kept us a little more comfortable. So they literally tell us that we don't have rights and nobody thinks about it because they're like, oh, we have healthcare, and our quality of living in Canada you can have a better quality of life in Canada for less money than you could, you know, in the US. So our Canadian dollar is worth nothing. So as long as we don't leave Canada, we can live here with relative, you know, middle class comfort or something too. So I think they've kept us just comfortable enough that people just don't, like, they don't ask. That's the thing. They tell us these things and nobody asks about it. Nobody thinks, like, I don't know. I find it kind of baffles me a little bit.
It's wild. And I just want to say for the record, and I've always found this to be lovingly adorable, that Samantha's Canadian comes out most when she says the word about.
No, do I have that?
A boot.
Do I say that? Like, oh, that's terrible. No.
It's the best. I had to do it. I'm sorry.
I want to take, like, I'm gonna have to take like you know, British like RP English lessons to like fix my accent.
It's hysterical. I mean, Samantha also speaks more languages than any person that I know, like in real life. I think we counted the other day, and you're at like 5 or 6 different languages that you speak,
but not all very well. I just want to put that out there. Like, please.
Yeah, I thought I was doing something because I sent Sam a note in Spanish, and she answered me, and I was like, of course she speaks Spanish.
But not like very. Nobody test me. I lived in Spain for a little bit, so I learned there a bit.
All right. So before we, I don't want us to run out of time before we take some time to talk about this. So I have really learned a lot from you about what it means internally for you to be Palestinian, right? And I think I don't know that there's really a way to express it, like, given all that's happening in the world. Like, I looked at the news this morning, and it probably was a mistake, and like I see like this whole thing that like Israel is the first country to recognize Somaliland as an, and I was like, these people can't be serious, right? Like they just can't, like, we can't be serious with this. Like, you and your colonizing, apartheid, oppressive, land stealing, like every word that we can put on it, that they have the audacity to like make pronouncements about what places can be recognized as like actual, like I just wanted to throw the computer, right? And so,
and also
whenever
who made Somaliland, like,
right, right, exactly, right? And so when these things happen, because I mean, I honestly, y'all, like, I consider Sam one of my best, like, I love her to pieces. We chit chat all the time. And so I always think of you when stuff is happening, right? Because you have personalized for me a lot of things that, like, you read about things and you think you understand things and you think you know things, and but there's a real difference when Sam says to me, like, I got to see my cousins the other day in Palestine, right? Like, it's just, there's no, this might be the way white people feel, like when they feel like really close to a black person, right? Like, right? Like, I don't know what it, I don't know if that's a good, but like this idea that like, there's a heart there. I can't explain it. There's just a difference in knowing you that has changed the way I see the world, right? And so I want to gift this to the audience in some way, and I don't really know like the best way to do it. And I don't know if there's a story you want to tell, or if there's anything you want to share that you'd be comfortable sharing with the audience. I'm trying to figure out, like, how do I gift this to everybody without putting too much of you out into the public space, right? But it's so important that people understand, you said it at the start, like, I don't ever want Palestinians to be flattened, right? Like, I don't ever want you to be flattened. I don't ever want like this idea of living in an apartheid state, living under genocide, living like all these things that are happening in Palestine, what's happening in Haiti, what's happening in Sudan, what's, now we're bombing Nigeria. Like all of these things that are happening, I don't want it to become flat, which I think is what media is trying to do, right? Like it's trying to flatten it so that you don't see that these are people. Like in the core of it, like at the core of all of it, these are people. Like they're people. Everyone's like we're people, right? And everyone should, as someone who came out into the world and took a breath, should be allowed space to live and to thrive simply because you were born, right? There should be no container for that. There should be no like, well, if you do this first, then you get, right? Like it should just really be like you were born and you breathe and therefore you have, right? So I just wanted to give space. And I don't even know what you could say if there's anything, like give space for you to be able to like live your truth, I guess, like in whatever way you'd be comfortable doing in this like very, very public, like online.
Well, well, first I do just want to say, Renee, like you've done the same for me. So I want to thank you for that too. And to both of you, like Jared also, like I do want to say, like, just take this to, like, this has been a really, this space, including the undefeated chat, I've never had a space that I felt at home in. And I feel like that with, I genuinely, sorry, I do mean that with both of you. And I've been really grateful for this space. So I just want to say thank you also for that. And I think maybe just to go back to, maybe that's a little easy, like emotionally easier for me, that what I was saying at the beginning, and I guess what my experience as a Palestinian has sort of made a bit visible to me is like something that I've, as I am navigating spaces as a Palestinian that's not, hiding my identity for fear of being killed or something like that. It's been, I feel like that's, I think even among, so, like I've had experiences with people that, are scholars or podcasters or have spaces like this where they're advocating for Palestinians and they're anti-imperialists and they're pro-Palestinians and yet simultaneously are sort of contributing to problems that, like I think something that I'm sure people here have come across it, but if you haven't, there's some really great work that's been done in the last few years on anti-Palestinian racism. And it actually, like speaking of Canada, it was actually started by the Canadian Arab Legal Association or Lawyers Association. And this has been something where they did very thorough work, using statistics and interviewing people and just sort of reevaluating it and reassessing it and sort of forming a definition of what anti-Palestinian racism is, because a lot of the times in the discourse, it gets subsumed into Islamophobia and anti-Arab racism, which there is overlap, but we also have like a very particular relationship to colonialism that is unique among, not, I don't want to say unique, but at this time, like we are also experiencing indigenous erasure that is not the same thing as Islamophobia or anti-Arab racism. And there's also the plurality of the Palestinian experience. Like I don't, I come from I'm not religious, but I come from a Christian Palestinian background. And so that translates to, like, I do have a Palestinian experience, but I've only, to be perfectly honest, I've learned more about Islam in the last couple of years just with all the social media sharing than I ever knew in my life. Like I've never had a Muslim experience in my life, but I do have a Palestinian one. And there's also Druze and very minority, but there were Palestinian Jews also in Palestine before Ashkenazi Jewish migration. So there's a lot of, and there's atheist Palestinians, and there's like so to conflate a Palestinian with just Islamophobia sort of erases us, and our experience is not going to be the same as like a South Asian Muslim person and what they experience, but the relationship that anti-Palestinian racism has is specific also to the settler colonial indigenous experience. And so I think if people aren't familiar with that definition, I would just love for allies to make sure that they're familiar with it, because I've brought this up with people that are talking about Palestinians and supporting Palestinians and constantly subsuming us into an Islamophobic narrative. And I've even been like, I brought this up with some scholars that have a anti-imperial podcast, and I mentioned, please don't contribute to that narrative, because that narrative, sorry, like just to jump ahead, that narrative also, it contributes to it. It also has been what has been co-opted by Zionists to say that this is an ancient Jewish Muslim war, that this is sort of the situation that's happening, or the way that Israelis will speak of Palestinians as Arabs, because they don't want to acknowledge that Palestinians exist. So we get just dismissed as Arabs, and they should go to other Arab countries. And the Levant, and again, like Arab nations are united because we all speak Arabic, but it's a very different group of people in the Levant as it is in the Gulf. And so like just all of those things, it gets very easily flattened out, and that's not what our experiences are. And I think what I've been experiencing in the last few months with some of these leftist anti-imperial spaces is that they don't see me as the Palestinian that they need me to be. Like, that's something that I've also recognized, is that allyship has been either I'm supposed to be a Palestinian reporter on the ground that's just like sharing, this is what's happening, or I have to be someone with, a Palestinian accent wearing a hijab or something. But like they treat me like I'm not Palestinian, and then they tell me that when I tell them about Palestinian, like one person literally said that, like, who is a European descended person, told me that I was speaking nonsense by pointing out the anti-Palestinian racism thing. So that's been a very interesting, like, I just feel like it's been very, and I don't know if I'm really unique in that, because we've been exiled, and scattered around the world, and we all, and I think that's a colonial experience for many people. And so, yeah, I don't know. So I feel like I get that a lot. And so that would be something that I would maybe just put out there, is that I think that's something that it's a bit, it contributes to our erasure. And that's central to what anti-Palestinian racism is that indigenous erasure that we're experiencing. So I guess that's something I would kind of say.
I appreciate you. Go ahead, Jared. Go ahead.
No, I was just gonna co-sign. I appreciate you as well. And you did just quickly make me think of the Shlomo Sand book that I listened to. Again, shout out to Renee's encouragement to the audible or the listening. The Invention of the Jewish People, which I think would blow many people's minds in terms of who predates the Ashkenazi, where and in what form, and in all. So anyway, yeah. But I appreciate all of that. Thank you very much. This perfect victim is an issue across oppressed communities for sure. So yeah.
That was a lot. I don't know. It's.
I can share more. I just don't. Sometimes I don't know.
You know what it is. I don't want to put you on the spot, because I know a lot of your story because you've chosen to like gift me with that. So I don't want to tell your story. Like, I want you to tell whatever part of your story you're comfortable telling. And I think it's important. part of the flattening of Palestinian people, I think, is exactly what you talked about with that podcast, like this idea that you have to look a certain way and talk about certain things and be certain things and practice certain things. And I think for me, part of the reason that I feel so intense and strongly about Palestine and what's happening is because I see so many like connective threads to how Black people are treated, right? Like the flattening, the monolith. Like if you're not doing this thing, then you know, like Biden said, like you don't support me, you ain't Black, right? Like this idea that like there's a way that you have to be in order for you to exist for other people as Black, right? And I think that's part of why I get so offended by the hashtag people, right? Because like this idea that like, you know, like you don't count because of this particular thing, as if my lived experience as a Black person who happens to be first generation parents of, you know, child of immigrants, all these things, means that somehow I'm not as, I don't even know if the word deserving is right, but like there's no acknowledgement, right? So there are all these things that happen when we start talking about oppression and like I don't like oppression Olympics. I don't want to like have this debate about like who's more oppressed and who had the harder time and who, like I don't care, like I want all the oppression to stop. Like I want everybody to be liberated. I want, you know what I mean?
It makes me, and I feel like that's where I feel like I relate also to what you're saying. Like, because when I've seen these responses by these left anti-imperial academic scholar podcasters, that it does make me wonder, like, who is your audience? Like when you're, so I hope I'm going to make sense by saying this, but it still centers prioritizing, like they might not be conscious, like they might think they're anti-racist or that they're, and I've had this happen with people that are not necessarily presenting as white. Like I had this happen with South Asian or East Asian people that I've talked to. But it's not that I want to fracture us among the left or start like breaking things apart, but what I notice is that if because that way of like needing, I'll just say for myself, needing to be the Palestinian that they need to be so that they feel that they're good people, that they have that moral high ground around their the odd, like that they are anti-racist, that they're supporting Palestinian people, that they understand racism, that they understand all these things, and they're presenting themselves as moral. But then I'm like, but if you're not listening to a Palestinian, like you're coming from a European background and you're not listening to a Palestinian person that's asking you not to represent, like to consider that there's, you know, that I'm not the, like I feel like there's a saviorism in the way that they're going about things because they want to have Palestinian guests that are either reporters on the ground or people that look like they're bringing these oppressed people into their space, and they don't know what to do with a Palestinian that has a Western accent or something. And like, and that I feel like I feel like I get that pushback. So I'm trying to articulate this, but I feel like I get that pushback because then they don't look like as great saviors if they have a Palestinian like myself with a Western accent and that's not part of the that's not Muslim. So it's not, I'm not speaking about Islamophobia and my personal experience or whatever. And then that, the reason I say these things is it makes me question, like, who are your audiences then? Because that, to me, that makes me think, are you a person that's trying to show white audiences that you are a good person, or are you trying to show global South audiences that you're a good person? And that's why I've been like kind of feeling irked by this, because I don't want to pull us apart, but it makes me wonder, like, as as the stakes keep getting higher, like, you know, when the genocide first started, the bar was low. It was like, are you against genocide or for genocide? But as the stakes keep getting higher, I guess what concerns me is that when I interact with these people, and if that's the stance that they're taking towards me, and like literally tell me that I'm wrong about saying this about anti-Palestinian racism, when the definition was actually very well researched over a period of years and lots of discourse and interrogation around this, and I present them with that, you know, argument, and they're telling me I'm wrong because they understand this racism better. It just makes me wonder, like, when it really comes down to it, whose opinion is more important to you? Because it doesn't sound like global South people's opinion. Like, am I making sense? Like, when it really comes down to it,
one thing I've learned from my atheist debates channels is that the evolutionary biologists apparently argue that we train our intuition. So when they say listen to your gut, it's in many cases that's a trained, learned response. So when if your gut is saying, I feel like you're talking to the global North and the colonizers, I feel like you should go ahead. I feel like, you know, you're probably right. You're probably right. You should hit them with
this particular situation, out of many situations that I didn't hate, I'm going to have to hate until further notice.
Just hate until further notice until they prove that, you know, I'm like, no, I'm you know, so no.
Like, yeah, I was just, and there's that identity thing. Like, it makes me realize, like, this, again, because some of these people overlap with some of the people, like, I don't want to point fingers if they don't have the chance to defend themselves, but I even like mentioned this in a comment on one person's conversation, because they were having this conversation, two white presenting men discussing whether or not Jewish people should be taking more responsibility about Zionism. And I found the whole thing a bit ironic because, you know, this is very nuanced and everything, but I was like, but you're also two white Europeans, whether you're atheist or not, but coming from a Christian descended European background. And you're having this whole conversation as pro-Palestinian supporters and not even acknowledging that maybe we should also should we then be also saying that shouldn't Europeans be speaking up more? Shouldn't shouldn't Christians be speaking? Like, so I just found like the whole thing was a little interesting, but I made that comment because they constantly were subsuming anti-Palestinian racism into Islamophobia. So I made a comment on their thing just saying, like, please, like, you know, look into this. And they wrote back, like, and I even said I was a Palestinian and, you know, please, and I explained everything. And they actually were quite hostile in their response. And they even, like, I put the link to the definition and then they deleted my comment to remove it from their video. And so, like, I just find it like, you know, that if we are genuine allies of each other, you know, whose opinion, because if your white audience's opinion and looking like morally valid among your white audiences is more important to you, then when, like, where will you be when we need you, right? Like, that's my yeah. So I thought that whole, like, it's just been, but I've experienced this with, like, I don't want to narrow it down to one person. It's just been interesting that since I sort of came into this YouTube space, I've encountered this a few times that, like, I've had to be there'll be people that have never had Palestinians on their podcasts, even though they talk about Palestine every week. And then they want me to come on. I'd be their first Palestinian speaker, but, like, not as a Palestinian, just to talk about films, and that's it. So, like, it's just it's just been a weird, it's been a weird experience. So exactly why I'm grateful for this and millennials and, like, you know, the spaces that it's been nice to be a part of.
Well, I feel like if you talk about media and you get the eyebrows from Jared, then you've won. Because that's the That's right.
The eyebrow barometer. Well, it's a natural reaction, but it's real. But that's it. Yeah, absolutely. And you salute to you, Samantha. The perspective and the work has been very a vital upgrade to our environment. So we appreciate it. And I wish I was surprised by that reaction you're getting, but no, it's But
I'm
so
sure
yeah,
it
that's
doesn't
why
just
you're
happen
always
to
welcome here.
Palestinians. Like I don't think I'm unique here.
So real quick, Jared, I dropped it in the
Mhm.
private chat, and so I just wanted to shout this out real quick because this art show has started. Shout out to Zora Murph. And the reason I'm in part shouting it out, one is because I can't wait to be able to go see it, but also because two, you're both probably unknowingly until right now part of this show, because I got a note a few months back from Zora asking if they could include my essay on the halftime show from last NFL Super Bowl as part of the show. And so I've been working behind the scenes to beef up the essay and to get get everything right. For people who don't know, the article and the essay was written based on the Vernon philosophy. And I applied the Vernon philosophy to this halftime show. And to discuss like why this idea of like looking for symbolism in something that's presented as a halftime show for the Super Bowl is like nonsensical. And so the entire essay is based on this idea of the Vernon philosophy. And as part of the request of how I beef up the article, I was asked to extend my thoughts a little further on how symbolism plays a role within First Media and all these things. And a lot of what has kind of helped me to be able to really explain how this all works is because of Samantha. So the entire article starts off with a quote from Jared and deeply explains like how the Vernon philosophy plays a role in these things. And then within the article, I use some of the knowledge that I gained from Samantha to explain how symbolism works within these things. And then you're both within the resources of the article. So this is now going to be a part of this show that's happening at a museum in Massachusetts. So I want to shout out Zora for the opportunity to include my writing, but also shout you both out because I could not have written the article without Jared's Vernon philosophy, and I could not have gone into the depth that I went into with explaining how this all works without Samantha's knowledge. So thanks to you both. Shout out to Zora. If you are in Massachusetts, please go see the show.
I'm gonna name my first born Vernon. That's hilarious. That's hilarious. So, listen, Renee, congratulations, and I certainly appreciate it. It's an honor for both of you to have. I admit it. I am deeply appreciative whenever good people find a way to make value of my relatively limited contributions, and so I appreciate it. And every time I've seen, and you've both taken little kernels of something that I've done and turned it into something far greater and put it to great use. So it's an honor. So congratulations, salute to Zora, and yeah, it's dope. It's an honor.
Yeah, it really is. And honestly, I don't know. I just feel like both of you also. I don't think that I would be able to put forward what I've been putting forward without learning from both of you. So thank you also for that.
Yeah, and salute to the real life Vernon. who wouldn't likely agree with everything we're saying here today, but is you know, he's good dude. He's a good dude. Morgan State representative, graduate, and everything. And the fastest hands at making pizzas I've ever seen. That dude, we would get in the slam and he'd do the dough and
That's a skill.
he was very, you know, Vernon was a monster on that stuff. So no, anyway, listen, Renee, Samantha, thank you both again for yet another great show. Please, everybody, check all the other discussions that you find in these spaces with Samantha. Not some of these other ones. No, I'm just playing. But the, you know, but please again continue to support the platform. To those who have dropped some super chats, thank you very much. You can now become a member. You can super chat. You can, I think we can get hyped now. I think that's the new thing on YouTube. I don't know. And Patreon is still there, so please support that. Make sure you have the bell rung so you don't miss any of the great programming. And as always, to my co-panelists and to the undefeated chat, peace, only because we know you're willing to fight for it. And we'll be back next week with more Saturday with Renee.